Namaste and welcome to the Bharat Vartha podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. In this episode of the Long India series, I spoke to Padma Shri Sridhar Vembu, who is the co-founder and CEO of Zoho. Zoho is one of India's most well-known and most beloved software companies. We had featured Sridhar sir on a couple of podcasts before on episode 9 about India's model for economic progress, and then on episode 51 on building indigenous capabilities. You should definitely check those out. This discussion was more focused on technology and startup innovation in India and what the government can do to encourage that. We spoke about a range of subjects as it rained and the birds chirped in the background. This was truly a special experience, as always. I hope you like it. Namaste, sir. Privilege and honor to host you again on our podcast. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your wisdom with us again.
Thank you for having me.
And also, before we begin, I guess congratulations are in order. Congrats on the Padma Shri. What was your first reaction when you heard it?
My first reaction, honestly, is our country has already rewarded me in terms of business success. So, piling up award on top of that seemed a little, personally, it felt, like I'm being given too much. But then I accepted it on behalf of our employees and all the people that worked hard for this. So, but I did feel a little squeamish about accepting an award, and I've already been awarded by our country so much.
Right, fantastic. Also, again, on that note, congrats on Zoho completing 25 wonderful years. What a journey it has been. It also has mirrored India's move from IT services to products in some sense. As you look back on the journey and as you reflect upon it, what are some of the learnings in that time that you can talk about?
Yeah. So when we got started, IT services were all the way, and there was hardly any product company in India, and it even seemed like India did not have good products. That was the prevailing mood at the time. That products are not needed, and we can be we can only do IT services. That was the mood. And looking back, I think there should have been a lot more product companies then, in hindsight. Because one reason I felt we needed that is the productivity difference is huge. If you look at between a services company and a product company, and India has to get on these high productivity industries, high productivity sectors, for us to really truly prosper as a nation. So that was my primary reason why we picked product versus services. But we need to be in higher productivity sectors. And so that was the thing. And if you look at, it's been, initially the going was tough for many years because we were trying to establish a new culture. But once this has taken root, Chennai has emerged as a large SaaS ecosystem. And it is really good to see that all that come up very so well.
So, how much of this services and products difference do you attribute it to some natural sort of reasons, right? So, for example, let's say the availability of people here, or let's say the dollar arbitrage versus a shift in mindset.
It's primarily a shift in mindset because as Zoho experience has demonstrated, we can build products here. We can build products with a team that did not have any experience building products. In fact, I'll claim that we start with nothing at all. In about 10, 15 years, India can build anything in 20 years. For example, do we want to be a leading player in semiconductors, leading player in aircraft, leading player in medical equipment? Give it a 15, 20-year time frame. Because we have the raw, latent talent. It's a question of how do you make it into somebody who can build aircraft or semiconductors or whatever. So you have to build the skills and then build the products. So if you have that 20 years time span, it's in one generation, we can catch up. That's a mindset that I want to inculcate in our country.
Right. Of course, one of the hallmarks of Zoho and how you built the company is how you've been able to hire, retain, and nurture talent. In the video that you put out, the 25th anniversary video, we learned about the inspiring stories of Hemalata, Muthulakshmi, and Abdul Alim. You said something that was so profound in that video, which was that we help them get on the first step of the ladder, and then they figure out how to climb. How do you think we can make this scalable across the country?
Really, employers have to do that. Okay, people with capital, people with the vision and drive who need the talent, have to help our fellow citizens get on that first step in the ladder. And there is a lot of people I get, constantly we get bombarded with inquiries, people wanting that opportunity. So we put them through some kind of incubation. Often we try to see if there is something that they can demonstrate, right? Over a month or 2 months. If only more businesses do that, we can both solve our unemployment problem in our country and solve the skill problem for employers. Both problems can be solved.
Right. In fact, I think just last week, a bunch of people were talking about the enormous salaries that a few engineers are commanding at this point of time, right? And I think what you're saying is the long-term solution is for you to develop talent really in-house, right? Through all of the things that I guess you are doing as part of Zoho.
Every company has to have a talent nurturing, talent building strategy, skill building, talent building strategy for their particular business sector. That's vital for us to achieve long-term success.
Right. So India also has a large base of engineers. We've been graduating many lakhs of engineers over the last, 10, 20 years, right? And, we hear of many reports from NASSCOM, other organizations on how poorly they rank on, let's say, the employability scale. How can we make these people immediately productive?
Again, this is an investment in skill building. I would like to not give up on people saying they are not employable. Everybody is not employable, at birth or at when they finish high school. So it's really the employability is, and given our pervasive poverty and pervasive lack of opportunity in our country, it is really mandatory for employers to step in and provide that skills. Not just say you're not employable to a prospective candidate, but figure out, hey, here is what I can do to help you. Demonstrate that you actually can do this. So we'll give you this hand up. We'll try to help you get on that first step in the ladder. Can you then climb? That is the question to ask.
Right. And are you working with other startups or other businesses to sort of replicate whatever you have done with the Zoho schools of learning? Is there some interest from the others in the business community as well?
Yeah, definitely there's interest, and we share whatever we do, our practices, all of that, and we get a lot of visitors to our Zoho schools of learning. We show them exactly what we do. There's no big secrets here. There's not a trade secret. What we do is pretty much out in the open. So we are willing to share all that, and I hope that a lot more people take inspiration and do this.
Right. So let's shift our gaze towards some of the technology infrastructure that we need to build. One of the most important, I think, infrastructure successes for India has been the Aadhaar and the India Stack. The way we have been able to deliver money or services to the last mile is envied even by the most developed nations in the world today. And one of the defining features of how this was built was the government did not solve everything by itself, but it enabled affiliate organizations and startups to leverage this stack for innovation and services. Do you see this similar sort of innovation in terms of building an Atmanirbhar technology stack taking shape sometime in the next 10, 20 years?
Definitely these things are good pointers, but I'm very proud of the way our country has tackled these problems, both Aadhaar, UPI. UPI is a giant success in India, and this is something that, as you mentioned, Western countries have not been able to do. They solve the universal problem of identity, solve the problem of payments friction-free, essentially free payments, right? And this is actually excellent stuff that we have been able to achieve. And I definitely applaud all the engineers, all the visionaries behind all this. And some of them I count as friends. And we have to learn from this experience and apply this to our Atmanirbhar across technologies. Right. That is something that we ourselves plan to play a role in Zoho, trying to figure out some critical production or capital goods technologies and making them widely available. So think of it as a capital goods platforms that are available for smaller scale entrepreneurs to come in and take it and run with it.
Right.
So take, for example, electric auto rickshaws, electric e-rickshaws kind of markets, where you can assemble a critical technology stack Then the actual production, all the last mile delivery, support, repairs, all of that can be handled by local entrepreneurs. This could build local jobs, and the technical know-how is essentially open sourced in this. So that could be actually possible. There are some many intriguing ideas here.
Right. Actually, that's a very important point, because anytime when you're talking about some nascent industry, the first few entrepreneurs will have to end up building the full stack of technologies. And it incurs a lot of investment, and it's a lot of fighting against the inertia. So in these kind of cases, maybe larger companies and the government, if it steps in and builds these like standard things that can be utilized to build services on top and so on, it could be of immense benefit, right?
Totally, yes.
Right. So one other aspect is that as we try to build these indigenous capabilities, we cannot ignore the massive utility of the products and services that we already have available. Some of these through large technology giants like Facebook, Amazon, as they call the FANG companies. But they do extract their pound of flesh, whether in terms of monetizing our data, or in recent times how we've seen that they can be entirely discretionary and act as sort of supranational entities by themselves. So my question is, how can India utilize these technologies and also assert our own digital sovereignty and so on?
Yeah, this is a tough nut. There's even other countries from Germany to France, UK or Australia, all of them are figuring it out. Recently, Australia and Facebook got into some kind of a dispute on similar veins. So this is not a problem that's solved anywhere. And the best thing is for India, given our talent pool, skill level, all that, to build these technologies. We have a lot of engineers. We have a lot of potential engineers, latent talent. So we have to build these technologies. And we also have to definitely use our government has to insist on holding these companies accountable to play by our rules, including taxes, all of that. For example, a lot of these companies, it's well known that they set up tax subsidiaries in Netherlands and all that, and siphon off that. Those have to be completely clamped down on the law, saying that if profit is made in India, the taxes have to be paid in India. These are very possible to do, but we need an active governance to do this, and impartial but strict in all these questions. That is possible, and we have to be a bold and self-confident country to be able to do that. Sometimes there is a feeling here that they are somehow giving us some free benefit. They are not. We have to be clear on that. So,
right. Yeah, particularly if you look at how, for instance, the Google Play Store has been over the last few years, especially, right? Very opaque processes. You don't really understand why certain apps are promoted, why certain services are restricted, and they don't even have people in our own time zone capable enough to respond to us on service queries and everything. So on that note, do you see like an Atmanirbhar sort of an app store kind of emerging, maybe for all the apps that we use right now?
It's possible, but see, these things, we first need platforms. We don't have very many platform companies in India. So we need these platforms before we get there. And I'm optimistic over the next 10, 15 years, these things will emerge. And so that is and then the government can give it a push by mandating certain things to be made here or locally controllable, all of that. For example, every country is now passing data sovereignty laws. Local database has to be kept here. They have to obey Indian law. That type of thing, law is useful. And similar, I think, laws, all that could be helpful. So this is where I think our country has to be bold and insist that technology be available, made available here, technology be transferred. And all of that has to be clearly part of the commitment these companies make here.
Right. And, some of these technologies are also too critical for us to leave it to bottoms up innovation, right? Things like AI, blockchain, crypto, IoT, and so on.
Semiconductors, all of that.
Semiconductors, exactly.
Are vital for our entire infrastructure, vital for our security, all of that.
Right. So in that situation, how do you think the government should sort of aid research and innovation through some of the top-down measures itself? Maybe, building institutions or giving grants, or do you suggest any other mode for the government to do these things?
First, actually, this government now, private sector is seen now as asset partners in development. That's important. You have to remember that in the past, India has not seen private sector that way, and it's refreshing to see this. Actually, I go to Delhi and from government officials, ministers, everyone, there is a lot of respect for the private sector and to as partners in development. That's an important mindset, because we all, I actually personally believe I should work in the private sector, but for the public good and the country's good. Now, everyone shouldn't have to be in public life in order to be serving the public good. So that's an important notion that we have to internalize. And that has been changing in the last 10, 15 years in India, definitely, and that's a good thing. And we have to still bring down certain items of the past mindset of red tape that arise from distrust. Those things will go away. They are going away, okay, over time. We are becoming a very business-friendly nation, and private sector also has to respond in kind with proactive initiatives in talent building, skill building, rural development initiatives, all of that. So it has to be a two-way street, and that is happening. And for these technologies, for the research and development, we have institutions like IITs and IIScs, and those things now have entrepreneurship cells. I know IIT Madras has a very active thing going on there. Similarly, IIT Bombay and other institutions have that too. And all of these have to be nurtured. The technologies have to be transferred. As I mentioned, one possibility would be these open source technologies that smaller entrepreneurs from small towns can use. That has great potential too. So these are the things I believe could make a difference in terms of creating employment, creating the skills and know-how in India.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely been a attitude change in the way, some of the public institutions are more open these days. For example, ISRO is working with a lot of startups on a bunch of initiatives and so on. Right, and technocrats like yourself are also being actively involved. So that's definitely a positive change that you see.
Yeah.
Right. So let's shift our gaze towards the startup ecosystem in India itself. It's one of the most talked about topics. Right. It's matured tremendously over the last 2 years. And I would say the heartening thing is, while MBA was sort of a default option earlier among the youth, right now, I think everyone wants to join a startup or start up a company themselves, right? There's also been that cultural change. Do you notice that change, and what are some of the positives that you see coming out of this?
Definitely now, being in a startup or doing a startup is a cool thing in India. And among all the cool things, is actually a good cool thing, because it's good for India to have a lot of these startups. A lot of people should be trying these things. That's all a good thing. And the one thing that I would like to advise entrepreneurs is keep your expectations in check, because being a startup is maybe cool. It is also a lot of work. It is a slog, and you have to focus on the long term. There is no instant success, because you have survivorship bias when you talk about instant success. Somebody may have succeeded, but an average entrepreneur does not see instant success. They allow to wait. They allow to work at it for a long term, a decade or more. So that is an important mindset. And we have to spread this into smaller towns, into rural areas as well. I actually would hope that entrepreneurs who have the vision, drive, migrate themselves to smaller towns. Don't overcrowd a Chennai or Bangalore or Pune or Mumbai, Delhi, all of that, because these cities are massively overcrowded. We have to take our act to the second tier, third tier towns and villages, and that is where the real Bharat awaits us. And there is so much latent talent, and there are so many people who are waiting for that opportunity. That to me is the real entrepreneurial challenge and the opportunity in India.
Right. So again, I mean, in this sense, Zoho and yourself, you are an outlier. You have bootstrapped the company, over the last 25 years, not even one dime of external funding, right? But whereas, I mean, people seem to think that there's only one way to build a business these days, in some sense, right? And I guess these are both very different mindsets. I mean, I was watching an earlier interview of yours where you said that you got a very good term sheet, but you just could not agree to one clause which said that you have to exit in 7 years, right? You had no intention of exiting the business as such. Do you think that sort of plays, on the mind of the entrepreneur, on the type of the business itself one would want to build? I mean, if there is no long enough gestation period, then would it affect the business itself adversely? What would your advice be?
Absolutely. If you look at our most successful product to date, Zoho One, which is doing extremely well, It's very windy here. It suddenly rains. You can
Right.
see that raining around here. So
Yeah.
hopefully you can hear me well.
No, I can hear you well.
So that product has taken about 12 to 13 years to mature. I proposed the idea of Zoho One back in 2008 or 9. Okay. And we shipped it in 2018. Now it's our fastest growing product. It's exploding off the charts. It's growing really fast. And it could reach $1 billion, one of the fastest ever in history. So, but that took its time to arrive here. And you have to give it time. Okay, we have to give time the time, as they say. So that is important for any of our really important initiatives. This is something entrepreneurs have to internalize, because very often there is this belief that within 3, 4, 5 years you will see something magical happen. That's often not true in the business world.
Right, right. And often, even though we see that mindset shift towards startups and innovation from the government, we feel like that the policy level, there's still so much more that could be done, right? I mean, for instance, let's say starting and shutting down companies should be a lot more simpler and so on. What are some top 3 or 4 things, in your opinion, that could be policy interventions that could make this startup and innovation as such more rapid in India?
We first have to digitize everything. So starting up a company, submitting documents, all of this, we can do it all online now. There is no need for any visits, anything. And it has to be, in a lot of cases, automatic approvals, automatic permissions, all of that. So it reduces the scope for even corruption at the lowest levels. And so that we are already on it. I think this is accelerated. This trend has to be accelerated. The second is we have to look at all our regulations governing technology and see which ones are still relevant. Constantly, we have to evaluate regulations with an idea, are they relevant today? And have to take a critical eye. And it's important to have private sector input into all these regulatory processes, and there has to be transparent. Obviously, if you invite private sector, they cannot be advocating only for themselves, but for the broader common good. So these are important. And these are the things that will make us even more business friendly. And we are going in the right direction. The ease of doing business is rising rapidly in India. I hope that in the next 5 years we'll reach the top 10 in terms of ease of doing business.
Right. So broadly, we're also seeing 2 things happen, right? So we're seeing a build for Bharat and then a build for the world. The build for Bharat, of course, a lot of interest in serving our own tier 2, tier 3 or MSME also, which were sort of an ignored class of consumers and businesses earlier, right? I mean, I remember, selling to MSMEs, selling software to MSMEs or any kind of intangibles was such a frustrating experience. And I think very few organizations like Tally or Zoho, in fact, had done this very successfully, right? That has changed rapidly over the last 5 years, especially. What is your opinion on building for Bharat?
Yeah. We are one of the fastest growing economies in the world. I mean, even pandemic interrupted, but now we are back on growth track. And we still have a long way to go. Our GDP could be $10 trillion and still would be only a middle income economy. So, lower middle income, not even upper middle income. So we have actually a long, huge opportunity ahead. And that is why Build for Bharat is important. We first have to fulfill our own needs. The Build for the world is important because we need imports from the world. Therefore, we need export. We don't need any imports. We don't need export. But we are in a connected world where we need the goods from the world. Then we have to give them something. So that is why Build for the world. And these two go hand in hand. Because the best way to build for Bharat is often to build for the world, because Indians also want the best technology in the world, not just something that is, an inferior version. So, and that means by competing with the best in the world, we can be sure that we actually also are the best for India.
So that's a very interesting point that you bring up. That day zero, you become a global company, right? So you have a very global outlook in terms of, how you architect your product or how you market and service and so on. But that's not the case usually when we see, right? We see that, companies often do this GTM, where you go to Southeast Asia or you go to US and dramatically things change. There are different expectations and so on and so forth. In your experience, I mean, you now serve about hundreds of thousands of customers across the globe. What are some of the cultural, differences in expectations between various countries in terms of software itself or products?
Yeah. There are definitely differences. US tends to be an early adopter of software. Countries like Japan will expect more perfection. Europe tends to be more conservative, and Germany, for example, you need local language support in Japan or Germany. A lot of these things are very specific to countries, right? You have to be aware of these differences and customer expectations, language expectations, a lot of these things, right? So for a startup, it is useful to focus on one market at first. Could be India, it could be US, it could be anything, but focus on one thing and get it right, get some traction, then broaden your reach. Because if you go all in all directions at once, you may not have resources to compete. Though is now expanding globally everywhere because we have reached a scale where now we can do this. We can put down offices everywhere. We are opening offices as we speak, in Latin America, more in Europe, and more in Africa. All over the place we are opening offices. So that's something we can do now. But we would not have attempted it 10 years ago. So.
Right. So one of the key changes also has been the fact that entrepreneurs today are a lot more savvy. They understand the terms and the metrics and the milestones very, very well, right? And there's a lot of positivity and optimism in that, in talking to founders. I talk to founders all the time. What are some of the risks that you see with the current crop of entrepreneurs? What should they watch out for?
The only thing to watch out for is this exit mindset. That if you expect an easy ride to an exit, that is often a problem. The second is, keep in mind that venture capital always comes with strings attached. That the VCs often will talk seductively in the beginning, but only 6, 7, 8 years into it, you will realize that their focus is different. They need an exit, and the founders' focus may be different. So often those relationships get frayed later as companies hit some tougher times. The VC relationships get frayed. So it's important for entrepreneurs to keep that in mind.
Right. So of course, I mean, with all of this growth that is being projected for India this decade, we'll see a lot of capital come into the market, right? A lot of growth funds are coming into the market, venture funds and so on. And as you said, they have a very different expectation of this. Some people do believe that the whole bootstrapping versus funding business is a false dichotomy. You can find a reasonable halfway mark, right? With all of this capital coming into India, what is the best way for us to make use of this capital and grow, basically?
So, focusing on durable, long-term, sustainable companies is the best way to use the capital. And often the temptation is to go for a quick hit, flip model, where you build something, flip it, and then go on like this. That model does not produce long-term employment, durable technology foundations, any of that. So we need companies that stay for the long haul. That is what India needs. I hope we use the capital that's available now to build such long-term companies. That is my wish.
Right. So we call this series of conversations the Long India series, where we talk to people who are optimistic about India's growth, India's culture, and we've discussed so many things today that kind of reinforce that notion. As always, I mean, it's been a wonderful, insightful conversation with you, sir. As we're approaching the end of this podcast, let me ask a very open-ended question to you. What are you optimistic for going forward?
I am actually very optimistic about India. India has the potential to be both a prosperous nation and a leader among nations, and looked upon as a model for the world. The way we solve our problems, because I'll tell you our civilizational strengths. Even amidst poverty, ours is a country of a lot of tremendous affection, attachment on the ground. You travel. I mean, one of my colleagues just narrated a story this morning. He traveled to some small town, a village somewhere. Nobody knew him. They asked him where he's from. He said, "Do you have a place to stay?" People took him in. Okay, random unknown people, and they were kind to him and they fed him. He stayed for a day or two and looked around. This kind of thing still happens in India a lot. And I have friends who have gone all the way to Kashmir in motorcycles. They tell me some random dhaba in the middle of nowhere. They will extend assistance. They'll say, you guys can stay here for the night and go on your journeys. This is India. This is the real India. That hospitality, that affection, that warmth. And our cultural strengths are immense. And for example, India is a country with fairly safe, relatively low crime rate country. That's something most of us don't appreciate. A lot of people like to complain about India, I mean Indians particularly, right? But we have to appreciate our own country, our own strengths, civilizational strengths. So that is why I'm very optimistic about India most.
Right. I hadn't planned on asking this question, but it's a personal question. When we talk about being Atmanirbhar and being self-reliant, you come across as someone who is very, very comfortable with who you are as a person. If you were to advise someone else, if you were to advise the youth who are listening to this to be, comfortable in who they are, as Indians, whatever, what are some words of advice you would offer?
I always say this: prestige is a trap. Prestige is a trap. See, a lot of us, we get trapped into expectations of other people's, what is prestigious. We want to go to the prestigious schools, prestigious colleges, do prestigious things, hold prestigious jobs, all that. But it also is a trap. Sometimes it prevents you from realizing who you are. So you overcome this. I mean, I live in a very modest setting here, but I love this. I'm surrounded by nature. There is, rain right now going on. You can see the rain coming into this scene. Yeah. This is a good life. Okay, this is a very good life. I love this life. I don't miss, am I in a 5-star hotel hobnobbing with the rich and famous? I don't worry about it. I'm happy here. So you want to get that intrinsic, and this is our deepest spiritual lesson of India is that contentment. Contentment, humility, gratitude, these are all very basic Indian virtues. And we want to every generation has to rediscover that for their work.
Right.
So discover contentment, discover humility, discover gratitude.
Right.
Then we can go on to achieve this.
Right. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful insights. Again, as I mentioned, it's been a privilege and honor to host you again on a podcast. And from the listeners and myself, we wish you the best of health and all the good luck for any of your future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Bharat Varta podcast. If you want to see more content like this, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We started Bharat Varta to facilitate long-form discussions on politics, policy, and culture. We don't necessarily endorse anything that was said in this episode. If you wish to offer us feedback, do reach out to us on social media. We are at Bharat Varta on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You could also get in touch with us on our website, www.bharatvarta.in. The links are in the description below. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.